data is the thing that powers AI. Without data, it really can't do a whole lot for you. So we see a lot of companies that I go into now, and the first thing, almost every engagement we go into, we have to get their data clean, because ultimately we want to start doing things like, one, doing market segmentation, understand who their ICPs are, building buyer personas, building buyers journeys. All of those types of things are things that you need to feed into the model from an AI perspective.
Influential and thought-provoking minds in marketing, sales, and business. The Business of Marketing Podcast.
Welcome again to the Business of Marketing. I'm A. Lee Judge. In my book, Cash, The 4 Keys to Better Sales, Smarter Marketing, and the Supercharged Revenue Machine, I featured insights from several industry leaders who helped shape the way sales and marketing work together. And one of those voices was Todd Ervin. Todd brought a real-world example of how smart marketing can drive measurable business outcomes and how aligning with leadership is key to making all that happen. So in this episode, we're going to hear lessons that apply whether you're building awareness, proving value to your leadership team, or trying to connect marketing efforts to revenue. So let's get into it. Let me join us today is Todd Ervin. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Lee. Nice to be here.
Glad you could join again because, I've gotten feedback from the book already. It's been going great. And the examples of the book, like the one you gave, really gives an additional bit of meat on the bones to the book. And so I appreciate that. So I want to get right into it because there's some things you mentioned in the book that I think a lot of marketers struggle with. And I even have a case in my own company where, we're dealing with it. And you have a great awareness building case from a company you worked at in the past called Primo water. And you mentioned how you identified a big gap in the market, which was people didn't even realize that your product at that time, in-home or in-office water delivery, was even a thing. So in that product awareness challenge that happens even before giving someone a chance to choose your brand, what helped you realize that awareness was the real issue, and what made you confident enough to shift marketing resources to fix the awareness problem first?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, it was a very unique position at Primo where we were the leader in home and office bottled water coffee delivery service. But what we realized that very quickly was that people associated bottled water and coffee delivery service with their office. And people just didn't understand that, yes, this is something that you can do at home as well to have, clean, fresh drinking water for your families. And the way it manifested itself is when I took over as marketing leader, I quickly saw that the bottom of the funnel, new customer ads that we were bringing in, we were very well optimized. So in other words, once we got someone to engage with us, we were converting. The conversion rates were very high from a marketing perspective. But then what I also realized as I started to align the marketing strategy to the company's revenue plan, that in order to hit the growth that we really wanted to hit, and the company had been growing at a pretty good clip, but in order to hit the type of growth we really wanted, we were missing top of the funnel awareness. So, in looking at that and looking at the revenue plan and then comparing, the marketing metrics and our budget to that, I knew that there was no way that we were going to hit that number if we only continued to focus on bottom of the funnel. The other thing that clued me in was just talking to people, friends, family, other colleagues from other companies. And when I told them what I was going to go do, and when you mentioned home and office, everybody's like, home? People get water delivered to their house? And it was so many people that I said, okay, this matching with the data that I've got that shows that, look, we're not doing anything at the top of the funnel. People are really engaging at already mid to bottom of the funnel for us. So it was sort of this combination of qualitative, research that I just done with my own friends, family, former colleagues, as well as matching that up with the data and then matching that data to the revenue plan, that I was able to realize that we've got to shift some of this budget. And we were so optimized at the bottom of the funnel that I knew I had room to shift more to the top of the funnel so that we could just start to build that awareness. And I knew that if we got more people in, we built that awareness and brought more people into the top of the funnel, our conversion rates would hold at the bottom of the funnel. So that's where we're going to get our revenue lift from. Without that, we would have remained stagnant, which was, good growth, solid growth. Marketing was meeting or beating its number, even, without hitting the high, getting more people in the top of the funnel. But really, to truly get to where we needed to be, we needed more people to be aware that one, the service was even a thing, and then two, Primo was your choice to go to for that.
Do you think it happens a lot in companies where if they have maybe they're okay with where they are being stagnant or their growth is minimal, but it is growing, that they don't even think to look at building more awareness, like they're so established in their market that they think we're good, let's not touch that?
Yeah, I think that does happen sometimes, and I think the other thing that's at play there is unfortunately there's a gap in some marketing leaders being able to connect that awareness building back to revenue. So when you're in these companies that are growing pretty well, everybody's budget constrained, right? No company I've ever worked for, I think, didn't say they were budget constrained. So when you
Hmm.
look at that and you say, well, marketing's hitting the number or they're beating the number, but then you've got this high level of growth that you've got to go get, and marketing's got to be a third of that, for the company. I think the the shift that you have to make and the shift that marketers have to make is being able to talk numbers with finance, with the CEO and colleagues in the C-suite to map out what it means for the full funnel if you start to do that awareness building. So I think there's a bit of a gap there where yes, there's a bit of kind of complacency and why do we need to spend more or why do we need to shift budget? But then once you can tie that awareness building to the full funnel and then show the metrics of if I get X percent into the funnel at a high level at the top of the funnel, this is how it trickles down and this is ultimately what it means to revenue. That's where you hit the sweet spot, and that's where marketers then are able to have that tough conversation with the CFO, because if you can speak the numbers and you can show the CFO the path to getting that return on marketing investment, it makes that conversation much easier for marketing to sell in.
So you're trying to build this case for shifting budget to awareness. And I think it's one of the biggest issues we have as marketers is sometimes the thing we know we need to do is the hardest thing to report on. It's hard to get numbers for top of the funnel. In fact, by definition, the awareness people are ones who are so far, they're the furthest from a deal of all of our prospects. So how do you start making that case when especially, I know it varies per industry, your sales cycle could be, a month, 6 months, could be a year. How do you what are some of the things you use to justify that to the CRO that, hey, I want to invest in this campaign? You may not see a result for 8 months.
Yeah, well, one thing that we did is we'd never had a brand awareness tracker in Primo. So one thing that you can do is stand up an awareness tracker. Now, again, that's going to be a little bit lagging because you're going to launch that initial tracker. You're going to get a baseline, and then as you run campaigns, you can start to tie that tracker back and start to understand when certain campaigns are in market. When you see that awareness, kind of that needle ticking up in your brand tracker survey. So a lot of companies don't have that tool in place, and it is a way to start to track awareness, both aided and unaided awareness. And then you can start to tie those metrics into, as awareness goes up, you'll start to see your conversion rates down funnel start to rise, and you'll start to see those new customer ads come on. But it does take a little bit. It is a as you don't turn on marketing overnight, especially in the digital world, and it starts working tomorrow. So it's really being able to go in, build a business case. And I tell all marketers, if you can, build that business case with finance, bring finance into that conversation. Because if you've got a good finance department, especially one that has finance business partners assigned to marketing, to sales, to the individual functional areas, they can build that business case with you. And now it's more of a conversation of we've got a solid assumption based on actual numbers that if we do this, if we start to build and put in and build in awareness, and then we can start to see that awareness go up in the brand tracker survey, we can now tie that back to our business case to say that, yes, this is in fact working. So here are areas we need to double down on. Here are certain areas maybe in awareness that we may need to pull back on. But it has to start with some form of all things reverting back to the revenue model. And that's how you get finance on board, and you get finance to basically buy you a little bit of time, which is the time that you need. So, but it has to be a conversation around the financials, or you're never going to get there as a marketer.
Marketers and sales leaders, if you want to close more deals and drive real revenue growth, you need cash. And I don't mean money. I'm talking about my new book, Cash, the 4 keys to better sales, smarter marketing, and a supercharged revenue machine. It gives you a proven framework to improve the 4 areas that impact revenue the most: communication, alignment, systems, and honesty. You need a stronger sales and marketing engine, and this book will show you how to build it. Get your copy now at aleejudge.com/cash. Now, back to the content. You mentioned the brand tracking. I know different industries have different ways of doing it, but and I won't nail you down to any particular software or tactic, but give me some idea of how you've seen in the past or some things you know about where if a marketer is listening now, they're probably going, okay, we hear you, we want to track our brand, but it's difficult. There's ways you can do it. There's always software platforms, there's social listening, there's surveys. What are some of the ways you've experienced?
Yeah, a combination. Back in the day, it was just surveys. Like when I started out as a marketer, we had a brand tracker survey that went. This was back in the wireless days that I was in, and our brand tracker at that point was running weekly, just because wireless is, it's constantly changing. But as I went through and went to different companies, that brand tracker would run monthly. Some of them, quarterly. It just depended on the industry. But then, as marketing and digital, really came on board, you start to really be able to look at things like sentiment analysis. You really started to be able to measure and gauge social media engagement, and then tying that back. And then the other piece is as you're launching, these awareness campaigns, especially in a digital world. And I know a lot of people say, well, you can't mix awareness with demand generation, right? But you can, right? Because at the end of the day, nothing should go out, even from an awareness perspective, that doesn't have some sort of a call to action to it. So as you start to launch these campaigns that are more top of funnel, and you're launching things and you're putting things out like brand videos, and you're putting things out, that are really meant to to attract that user, to really kind of pique their interest for a first time, there should still be a call to action to it. So now you've got them in the funnel, you've got it where you can track it. And even your awareness campaigns, a lot of marketers out there, most of us are running, HubSpot, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, whatever it might be. All of your awareness campaigns should still be tagged so that you're getting that connection back in the form of real data. Now that's obviously the digital world, right? You can track everything in the digital world, whether it's an awareness campaign or not. The things that were, that people describe as softer in marketing, so things like running radio ads or out of home TV, those certainly are, a lot harder to start to track. But again, there are techniques that you can use to add simple things like a promo code to an ad that you're running, whether it's TV, radio, print, whatever, or out of home. You can do things like that now, again, can tag right back into your marketing automation system. So now you have the numbers that show that engagement, and then you can start to track that engagement and see the lift that it has all the way down funnel.
It's interesting you mentioned radio and television, because I had an early part of my career was in radio and TV, and I even did some marketing then. And at that time, it was normal to not know exactly who saw or heard your ad. We measured it differently. And I think where we're at now is marketers are having to learn that old school kind of measurement again. I've talked about case studies recently, like the old Coca-Cola billboard case study. They knew they sold more where the billboard was, right? Yeah, versus where it wasn't. And at that time, it wasn't, how many views did you get? How many bottles did you sell per billboard? They just knew it worked or it didn't work.
Right.
And I think now with this zero-click marketing, where we can't track as much as we used to, we're losing cookie access due to privacy concerns in browsers, and marketers are going to have to learn to understand what I turned on versus what I turned off. Is the thing that's on working? Now, the struggle there is it could be a 6, 8 month, 12 month lag of what you turned on. And then I've dealt with overlapping campaigns where you turn a campaign on, someone says it's too much, you turn it off, turn a new one on. And the funny thing is, you turn the new one on and the deal comes in, it could have been from the last one that you turned off 4 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a marketer struggling to create content that's truly unique to your brand, here's the key. Your experts and executives are your most valuable content assets. Conversational content like videos and podcasts featuring your team stand out above all other content. So, instead of creating content that sounds just like your competition, start leveraging the unique voices inside your company. Thought leaders and authentic conversations build credibility and engagement. At Content Monster, we specialize in remote content production, meaning we coach your people to be comfortable on camera, then we capture and produce high-quality videos and podcasts featuring your team and customers. No need for expensive production crews, long production plans, or complex setups. Want to see how it works? Visit contentmonster.com today to learn more. I know you mentioned something about dashboards. So, we have these lagging indicators when we do this marketing and things come in late, and we try to make decisions based on historical information, which may not always be accurate based on where we're trying to go to versus where we've been. So give me some insight of your experience of trying to build dashboards, explain what happened, what is happening, and use that dashboard to help get more budget and attention for your marketing efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, when it comes to building dashboards, and at Cortado, our revenue operations team, we do this for a lot of clients. We build these dashboards, and one of the things that we see often when we go in and we're working with a client, especially if it's in the marketing team, is they want to build this dashboard sort of in a silo. So they want, marketing wants to be able to track marketing metrics. Sometimes they want to put up a wall and don't want anybody to really see the metrics that that are sitting behind the wall, and only share the metrics that they want. But the first thing that you have to start with building dashboards is you've got to get buy-in. So you got to find out, one, who are the key stakeholders in the company that need to have access, need to use these dashboards, need to have certain views for themselves, whether it's a CEO level dashboard or a finance level dashboard. It all starts with, what do I need to tell people? What's the story that I need to tell the rest of the organization here? So when we talk dashboards, it's very important that it's a collaborative effort when they're built to begin with. So that way everybody understands, here's what we can track, here's what we can't track. Here's how we can perhaps use data to kind of triangulate some things, between the data within the data that we do have, so that we can start to tie things back and get baseline. So that's the second piece. So I mentioned this thing about getting a baseline. The conversation that a lot of people do understand is, look, we haven't done this before. We haven't measured this before. We're standing up these dashboards with the goal in mind to get much tighter on our tracking. And, in order to do that, we have to get a baseline first. So, typically the C-suite understands baselines, finance understands getting a baseline. So when they say, well, what's your goal? You can set some soft goals based on assumptions that are agreed upon by the team, but make sure that those goals are set and make sure everybody's aligned, that what you see in the dashboard to start, let's not panic. Let's all get together and say, this is the timeline when we expect to start seeing results. And it takes a little bit, of you as the marketer to know and understand how long it takes certain things to take to be able to set those expectations. And then once you've got that set, everybody's agreed on the dashboards, everybody's agreed on what's tracked, what's not, and then how we can triangulate and bring different pieces of data together to start to get a view. Then you've got buy-in from the team. You've got alignment. So it really has to start there. Then this next piece gets to, you brought up something around, we don't know whether, this person came into a campaign off of something they saw 2 months ago, or something that they saw further down funnel once, they're already aware that they have a need, right, as part of the buyer's journey, and now they're evaluating their options. So we don't know exactly where they came in. So the other thing that we taught our clients actually a lot about is attribution. And the organization has to agree on what attribution you're going to use. And what I tell marketers who are just starting out to try to get some of these measurements, look, at the end of the day, the easiest one to measure is first touch attribution, right? So
Mhm.
let's just start there. And before we start getting into multi-touch attribution, or you can get into last touch, which I know some companies like to use as well. But the easiest one to get is let's just start with first touch, and then let's just kind of see where we go from there. Let's get a baseline there, and as we go, we can start to get more sophisticated. And then as we bring our systems and processes for measuring online, then we can start to get into multi-touch and start to attribute things to very specific campaigns, very specific tactics within a campaign. But you have to start somewhere, and if you don't start, immediately with really kind of the easiest thing to track, you're going to spend a lot of time just kind of spinning your wheels and convincing people.
It's interesting you mentioned. Well, I want to dive into a couple of things there. So the attribution part, I worked in marketing operations for a long time and have tried every form of attribution there typically is out there. And what I learned was a lot of it depends on your sales cycle and what you're selling. So, for example, if you're an e-com and you're, say, Amazon, sometimes the last touch is the one to measure. Like they've been researching this for months. What was it that made them pull the trigger and buy the thing? Because it's also the closest to the purchase. But then with the longer sales cycles, because there's so many touches and it's a lot of dark social, a lot of dark, word of mouth stuff going on. The first touch is often the best one because at least where our leads came from.
Hmm.
And then the multi-touch, I say, well, you know what? It exists, but hardly anybody can do it. I mean, it takes a lot of data. It
Yeah,
takes people dedicated to working that data. I mean,
absolutely.
I had a job as a marketing operations person and a sales ops person,
Mhm.
and my job was to examine data all day for marketing specifically. In that case, multi-touch was closer to being possible,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
But unless you have that kind of structure in your company, multi-touch, I wouldn't advise anybody to touch multi-touch, and decide first touch or last touch based on your sales cycle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense, and you're right. There are a lot of people that say, "Oh yeah, we do multi-touch attribution," and you ask them to explain it, and they can't really explain how they do it, or it's a little bit wishy-washy. But yeah, you're exactly right. Those longer sales cycles, the first touch certainly makes sense, and a lot of the companies I advise now are primarily B2B.
Hmm.
In Primo, we had both B2C and B2B, so building that awareness in Primo and tying that attribution back for the consumer segment was actually pretty quick. Consumers are going to, once they're aware of something and they start to evaluate it, on their buyer's journey, they start to evaluate their options. And then it's kind of, resolve my concerns. Okay, well, let me just kind of double check a few things. They're going to make decisions, in a lot of cases much more quickly. In a B2B setting, it's often that first touch is where you have to go because, to your point, a lot of the organizations I work with now, they are longer sales cycles. There are more members of the buying decision team that are
Mm,
part of that as well. So you've got to bring multiple people along on this journey before you actually make a sale. So that first touch is really the way to go, in my opinion,
yeah,
for those
I
longer
agree.
cycles. Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe we should introduce the term multi-touch understanding because in a long sales cycle, one, you won't see all the touches, but if you gather enough data amongst all those touches, you might get a higher understanding of what the process looks like. Like you can't attribute it to just one thing or two or three things throughout that. I wouldn't even call it attribution, but I was explaining to someone the other day of where we're going with AI in terms of using our data. And my theory is that no, it's not even theory. We're almost there. Every software we use now is injecting AI into the software. So your CRM has AI in it, your marketing automation has AI in it. But where we're very close to, once we get past the internal privacy issues, is that AI will be our user interface, and we'll be able to just say, instead of going into each individual uh, software, we'll just say, look, across our data, is there a correlation between trade shows and closed deals? Is there a correlation between email open rates and the deals we had this quarter? Because AI can look at all those touch points more so than we would know to even look for and might uncover some things we hadn't thought about to say, you know what? When you had an email that started off with how to, those emails happen to be associated with more people, more companies who close deals at this dollar amount. And that's a crazy thing to think that a human could actually figure out. But with enough data,
Mhm.
AI can help us uncover some interesting things, I think. And that brings me back to the data part.
Mhm.
You mentioned the data. So what about these companies who don't have the data yet? Like, I talked with a construction company last week not company, construction brand, who had
Mhm.
several different branches and dealerships. And some of them were just starting to
Right.
introduce CRMs.
Mhm.
And my encouragement to them was, okay, you're not there yet of analyzing data with AI, but you can start gathering the data.
Mhm.
So what do you say to those organizations who haven't quite yet began to gather the data they could be using?
Start now. If you don't have the
Yes.
data, you're dead in the water as far as AI is concerned. Literally, AI data is the thing that powers AI. Without data, it really can't do a whole lot for you. So we see a lot of companies that I go into now, and the first thing, almost every engagement we go into, we have to get their data clean because ultimately we want to start doing things like one, doing market segmentation, understand who their ICPs are, building buyer personas, building buyers journeys. All of those types of things are things that you need to feed into the model from an AI
Hmm.
perspective. So it starts to understand who your customers are. It starts to understand how you're going to market. And then from an analytics perspective, the data has to be has you have to have it, number one, and it has to be clean and it has to be structured properly in order
Hmm.
to understand anything from it. So I tell anybody out there who's talking or considering any of the sexier parts of AI, you got to put in the work first to be able to get that. I described it to one client like it's like going to the gym. We're gonna come in and we're gonna build. We're gonna do a lot of data cleansing stuff for you. We're gonna really kind of make sure that your data is in order. Everything is structured so that we'll be ready to use AI from everything from content creation to measurement, all of that. But we got to do the hard work first. Like you don't like to go to the gym, but we're going to go to the gym. We're going to build that muscle. That muscle is called data. And guess what? Then you're going to have your beach body come
Okay.
summertime. You're going to be able to do
Okay.
all these sexy things with AI. So that's really the way you have to think about it. Is it really does have to start with the data, and it starts with making investments in whether it's people internally or you're going to bring in third party consulting to do it and do it probably quicker for you to get that house in order. But then you've got to have the people inside the company that are going to manage data governance. So once you've got good, clean data, you have to have somebody that's responsible, one, for feeding that data into AI so you don't end up with a mess there. And then two, you have to make sure that all of the users, all the people inputting data are keeping that data structured and aligned to the guidelines that are set.
Well, we'll wrap up on this. So I love that we're talking about AI. How do you see AI changing the way the work you do happens today, and how what the clients are asking for, and how you approach it, how you're using AI to make to do better work?
The way we look at it is we first use and test AI on ourselves as consultants. And we advise our clients to do the same. So, start with AI, using it as an organization, because what you need to do is get the organization used to and comfortable with AI. We call it making the organization AI ready. And
Mm.
then you have to also understand kind of that human and AI interaction. So, right, it's not the robots aren't coming to take over the world. The robots are coming to work with us and make our lives easier. So, once you can start to understand how AI helps you in your daily job to basically deliver great products, great services, whatever it might be to your customers, to your clients, then you can start to use it for more things to engage your clients, engage your customer base. An example of one of the things that we do is I, going back, I'm also a market researcher by trade. So I'd run focus groups or 16 to 20 individual interviews. Coming out of that type of a project, it would take me 2 weeks to go back, listen to transcripts. You read transcripts, listen to audio, start to pull out the common themes and this and that. Now I can do that with AI. Takes me about heck, less than 30 minutes to really kind of go through it and to pull out the common themes and move down the ladder of kind of continuing to ask the AI questions till I get it narrowed in. So not only does it take me a lot less time, it's also more accurate because AI doesn't have researcher's bias. Like,
Mm,
we all have bias as researchers. So I found that AI, has enabled me to become a faster marketer, which means I can turn around projects and I can speed things up for my clients in terms of delivering what they need to go to market. And then two, I just feel that I'm getting a much less biased, output from the AI running that analysis. Now I still have to look at it and put the human lens on it because I was in the interviews, I ran the interviews and heard certain things. So there is some massaging that happens, but then I can then take that research or, I can use that AI, that came out of the research and I can use that then to build a first draft of buyer personas. And then from that, I can take that same AI, run a query once I've loaded those personas in and have it build me messaging pillars. Then I can take that and have it, build marketing campaigns for me, right down to email content, LinkedIn ads, whatever it is. So we take all of that and we use it ourselves to deliver. That's the way we started, was using it to deliver projects for our clients much more accurately and much faster. And then what we've done is now we're productizing what we're using for ourselves to then build a capability for those clients. So now we walk the clients through, here's what we're doing as we're building this for you. We're building your foundation. And while we're going along, you're going to be learning this because now we can actually build those same AI bots for you so that when we leave, you've got all this to use. You're ready. You've got clean data because we did that for you. You've got your personas, you got your ICP, you have everything that you need to input into that AI model to then make your sales organization much more efficient, make your marketing organization much more effective and much more efficient. So that's the way I would, recommend that anybody or any company that's looking to start to try AI, try it first internally, build some things, build it with the lens of how do we take what we're doing to to really make ourselves better as
mhm.
marketers, as salespeople, as whatever it is. How do we then take that now and bring it to our customers versus just looking and trying to go out and do something sexy with AI first to attract customers?
Yeah.
It's probably not going to work because you haven't really tested it, nor are you really truly understanding how to use it right and how it works.
So it's utility, not just a pretty fun thing. It's something you can actually have utility with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny when you see, when we're working with clients and we see, we're walking them through this process and then you see they get this light bulb moment. They're like, oh, now I get it. That's why we had to do all of this stuff you had us do before. Right?
Absolutely.
It's kind of like the Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off, right? He's like,
Hmm.
well, no, Daniel, son, you can't do actual karate yet. You gotta get this.
Got to do the work. Like you said earlier, put in those reps first.
Got to get the foundation built. That's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, Todd, man, thanks for joining me. Always a great conversation. And thanks to the listeners. If you're listening to the podcast and want to also see Todd and I video the podcast, and others are available in the podcast section of contentmonster.com. Catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast, a show brought to you by ContentMonster.com, the producer of B2B digital marketing content. Show notes can be found on ContentMonster.com, as well as ALeeJudge.com.